Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to go through how I made this wolf. It's for a Secret Santa doll swap in the art doll community. So I made this little one for my partner. It's a pastel wolf. Don't know if you can quite see the colours properly, but she's got a pastel sort of mane, and sort of I went for like a wolf coloured marking on the face. So there's a little bit of white here, whiskers, a white body, and a pastel tail. So yeah, if you want to know how I made this doll, then just keep watching. Alrighty, so I'm starting off with a resin cast of a sculpture that I've moulded in silicone and then cast in resin, and I cast some glass eyes inside of this head. And if you'd like to know how I do the glass eye casting, I have a tutorial in my shop at creaturesofnat.com. There's also a tutorial on there for basic moulding and casting resin, so you can get the whole deal on my shop at creaturesofnat. So once that's cured and ready to go, I then prime my piece using a primer. I have a primer video if you're interested on my channel as well. And then I go ahead and paint any little bits that need to be painted. So normally I paint around the eyes, the nose and the mouth. I generally use black all the time, but sometimes I'll use like pink, or if I wanted to do a fantasy animal, I could do like silver or gold or something like that, but it just depends on what you're doing. But I normally do black just because it's kind of a little thing about my dolls. And I use a water-based acrylic paint called Chrome Acryl, but you can use any acrylic paint from your local craft store. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, and you don't need to be too neat unless you're not covering the face with fur. So because I am covering the face with fur, I don't need to be too neat. So the same deal with the feet. These are something that I have sculpted. I sculpted these in Sculpey actually, and then I molded it in silicone and cast it in resin. And I'm using the same black paint that I used for the face, just to roughly colour in all of the claws and the paw pad bits. Again, you can use any colour you want, like a pink or something. I use pink quite regularly, but for this one I'm doing a black paw pad. Moving on to the faux fur, and this is kind of the last of my faux fur with this pastel one. I don't really know where to get it again, so that'll probably be it for this fur. So what I decided to do was a pastel colour and a white colour. So with this I had enough fur to do pastel tail and like a pastel mane and a bit of the head. So I used a pattern that I made. I have a pattern video coming up on my Patreon. I have it filmed, I just have to edit it and put it on my Patreon, and that will be for my $5 and up tiers. And the link will be in the description if you're interested in something like that. And I'm just drawing out all the patterns that I need to cut out onto my backing, and then cut them out using a small pair of sharp scissors. Because these were only small, I just cut them out as I was going. When I do bigger pieces, I just cut out a big section, and then I use the leftovers for any furring that I apply, or just leave it in stock, or put it in a bag in my shop, because I have a lot of offcuts of faux fur as well. So this faux fur is very similar to Mongolian faux fur, which is this faux fur. So I thought the two would work really well together, and this one is just like a plain white faux fur, Mongolian faux fur. I quite like this fur, working with this fur. It's got a nice texture, and I just really like the way it looks. So I'm going to go ahead and draw out the rest of the pattern. Something to keep in mind is the direction of the pile of the fur. So you always want to make sure it's going from front to back. So that's the end of the pile to the tip. And that way you won't have the fur going in the wrong direction, but that's something you'll learn when you do it a little bit more as well. So I'm just cutting out roughly where it was in a big chunk, and as you can see, this faux fur is a little bit sort of curly, if that makes sense, and that gives a really good texture for the dolls that you're making. So yeah, using a small pair of sharp scissors, I'm going to go ahead and cut just the backing out of all of the patterns, just being careful not to cut the pile, because that won't look so good. And I always go around the edge of the faux fur that I've cut out just to pick off any loose bits of faux fur, because it ends up looking a little bit messy, and it also makes it a bit easier to sew as well and pin and all that sort of stuff. So just some general cleaning sort of maintenance along the way will help you a lot. You can also trim the ends of the faux fur for sewing as well, but I tend not to do it just because I don't really like the look of it. But it's totally up to you. So once all the pieces are cut out, I then go ahead and pin them first side together. I prefer to use a sewing machine to sew. It's a lot quicker, it's a lot stronger, but there are some things that it won't do, so you can't sew everything completely. So I usually leave the back end open so I can turn it the right way around, but I'll get to that in a second. Now I just use a glass head, ball head needle pins. It's nothing special, and I just go ahead and I'm pinning all the pastel bits that need to be sewed on first, and then once that's all sewn up we can move ahead and sew the body together. The tails are a little bit different, so depending on how thick your tail is will depend on if you can use the sewing machine or not, because you have to turn things inside out. Small thin tube bits are a bit more difficult to turn inside out, so I tend just to hand sew them if they're quite thin. If they're thick enough, I run them through the sewing machine and it's so much faster. And I don't have a fancy sewing machine. It's quite old now. It's probably about 15 years old. It's a brother, but still works really well. So this is what we have once everything has been sewed up, and then leave the legs open and the back end open like I said before, and also the neck area so I can attach the head to it. And then once this is done, I can go ahead and turn it the right way around. Sometimes it's a bit difficult, that's why I leave things open, and I'd also recommend using a wooden tool or something that's like a soft plastic tool with a rounded tip. You don't want anything too sharp like a metal tool, because you'll end up ripping the backing of your fur, and then you'll have to sew it up by hand anyway. So I always recommend using blunt tools to turn things the right way around, and it can be a bit difficult if you don't have a big enough opening. So this is what we have when it's turned the right way around. As you can see, some of the fur is sewn under the stitching, but we can pick that out, no problem. And then it's a bit fluffy as well. So we'll also need a trim when it comes to it. And at this stage, we can go ahead and make the armature. I have an armature making tutorial inside in my shop at Creatures of Nat as well, if you're interested in how I'm making it. For this one, I'm using a ball and socket and wire combination armature. I'm using this one just because I want the legs to be a bit thinner, and the ball and socket for this particular one is a bit thick, just because the head is quite big and it's a large doll. So I opted for metal, aluminium legs, and also a ball and socket frame for the spine. So I go ahead and attach the head, and you can see how it's coming together now. I'll need to attach the paws. That's also a tutorial in my shop as well, if you want to know how I do all of that as well. And then once that's done, I can go ahead and start adding any polyfill and sewing things up. Polyfill is just like a stuffing that you find in pillows. I also have a video going into detail what I stuff my dolls with. And then I can go ahead and sew everything up using a ladder stitch. And ladder stitches are pretty easy to do, and it works really well for concealing edges and stuff. And then I go and glue up the ends to my resin using a tacky fabric glue. I get mine from Spotlight here in Australia. It's nothing that you wouldn't be able to find in any local craft store. So once that's done, I add a little bit of polyfill to the neck area, and then I can start picking out all of the pile that's been a little bit stuck underneath the stitching, and then go ahead and add some more polyfill, sew everything up at the tail, and then sew the back end up. So that's the last thing that I do, is the tail and the back end, and again using the ladder stitch. And you want to get a good quality thread as well, because low quality threads snap. So this is what we have once everything's been sewed up. I can start positioning the armature a bit better, because sometimes it gets a bit wonky when you sew things up. So I can go and fix that, and then I'll give him a nice trim, and then I can start adding the faux fur. I have a trimming tool on video on my Patreon if you're interested in something like that as well. So this is what it looks like once I've given her a trim and sort of fabric sculpted, I guess, the faux fur to make it look like give it some shape and a body. And then I can go ahead and add all the faux fur as well. And I'm doing a wolf sort of structured colouring to the face. So where the snout is, the bottom half will be all white as well as under the chin, and the top half will be a pastel colour. So this is what it looks like when I've added all the faux fur. I decided to add some black ears as well. I do that on a lot of my dolls, just something that I do, and the little black stripe things on the eyes. And then I can go ahead, give it a trim, and start cleaning everything up. When you work with faux fur gets everywhere. And then, yeah, just pick out anything that's in the wrong place, and then add some more details with that same paint. I use a combination of that chrome acrylic paint and some fabric paint by the brand Jacquard. That's really good paint, and also some pens or textures from the brand Sharpie that for some reason I can't get in Australia anymore. They're called Stained, and they're really good for adding any details to dolls and stuff. And I'm just adding some more colour to the mouth area as well, just to bring it out a little bit more. And then I can go ahead and add some whiskers, and this is what we have. This little one has already found a home. Like I said, it was my Secret Santa doll swap. But I have a couple of dolls in my shop at creaturesofnat.com that are looking for homes. We open for commissions again next year, taking a little bit of a break this season, or this holiday season, I guess. So yes, thank you again to my Patreons. I really do appreciate your support. I have a lot of stuff on there. If you want to go and check it out, you get access to a whole lot of videos and content, tips and tricks and photos and stuff. And it's in my description down the bottom, in the description box. You can also check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.